What if I told you your workplace isn't just full of coworkers and deadlines, but something else? From shadowy figures in empty hallways to voices whispering when no one's around. These are the real ghost stories from the workplace that will make you think twice about staying late at the office. Tonight, we're diving into terrifying encounters that happen in everyday jobs. Hospitals, offices, schools, you name it. If you thought your workplace was stressful before, just wait until you hear these chilling stories. Hit that like button if you've ever had something creepy happen at work. Subscribe for more scary stories every week, and let's jump straight into it. Being in the logical corporate world, there is hardly any space for ghost stories and theories. However, this one I can't ignore. I, 27 million, work as an operations manager for a multi-service company. I work on the 17th floor of a massive, high-rise office building in the middle of town. Most days, I waste away with my spreadsheets and inventory, passing the day in front of my computer. Other days, I actually visit my sites and talk to my staff. The building I work in has staff of mine in it, but only 4 of them, and I rarely see them since they are generally on other floors, hard at work. Only after 2 weeks with the company did I realize that 3 floors of the building have no tenants. Just 800 square meters of empty, dark rooms with thin walls and dark blue carpets. Each floor has 3 bathrooms, male, female, and accessible, which we service only once a month if there are no tenants. All seem normal until one day my elevator ride from my office floor to the ground floor unintentionally stopped on one of the empty floors. I poked my head out of the elevator, thinking there was someone getting on, only to notice we had stopped on floor 14, the uninhabited floor. My body went cold as I stared into the empty hallway, noticing nobody around. I crept back into the elevator and looked at the buttons to see if I had accidentally pressed one. Nothing. The only floor glowing was the ground floor. Strange. I pressed the close doors button, but the elevator wouldn't close. I began to panic. I stepped out of the elevator and pressed the outside button, hoping another one would show up. I stood quietly for a moment and watched as the elevator I had just exited began to close, and I was just not quick enough to grab the doors. There I stood, alone in the dark, next to the empty offices, with only the eerie sound of the wind blowing against the building. I bolted for the fire escape stairs when I heard it. The chilling sound of a bathroom stall door closing in the female toilets. I stopped for a moment and turned to face the bathroom. The door was slightly ajar, and the wind was blowing through it. I was immediately horrified. You see, the door was one of those hydraulic ones that close on their own, which meant someone had to be holding it open from the inside. I panicked and ran out the fire escape doors, down the stairs, all the way to the ground floor. Out of breath, I ran to security and begged them to come back up with me to check the bathroom. The guards thought I had gone mad, saying the floor was empty, and assumed someone from another office had just come down for a more private bathroom break. Still, we went up to the floor and searched all around. Nobody in the women's bathroom, nobody in the men's. Who could it have been? I asked. Security said they would check the tapes and get back to me. What really creeped me out was that all the stall doors were locked. Maintenance had not unlocked them since there were no tenants. A few days passed, and I had completely forgotten about the experience, back to my normal programming of sitting behind a desk, focusing on the logical processes of my day-to-day. But then, on a late Friday afternoon, I got a knock on my door from 3 of the security guards asking me to confirm my story from a couple of days prior. I explained again what I had seen, and they stared at each other in a strange manner. I asked them what was going on, and they explained the following. Nobody came to that floor. The security footage didn't catch anyone on floor 14, not even me. I stood in silence. "Sir, are you sure it was floor 14? They asked. I was certain of it. Each floor has a sign. They assured me they checked every floor to see where I had popped up, but nothing. Here's where it gets more intense. There were tapes of me walking out of the elevator on the ground floor. Normal, mundane. I asked to see the footage myself, and that's when I saw it. On the top right corner of the camera, facing the doors of the office, on floor 14, the face of a woman. I know she's there, and she knows I exist. I have lost 17 kilograms in the last 2 months because I no longer take the elevators. I work for a doctor's office that is situated beside a hospital nearly a century old. The building I work in was built 10 years ago and has 3 stories of assorted specialists and doctors' offices that aren't associated with the hospital. Behind it is the emergency room, which is actually older than the hospital itself. I'm not surprised about the hospital or emergency area being haunted. It holds a great amount of history, so I can expect there to be lost spirits roaming around those buildings. But I never expected those spirits to drift over to my office building, which is at least 50 feet away. My first experience happened in the early morning hours 6 months ago. It wasn't quite 8 o'clock when the lobby doorknob rattled loudly. I watched the door, expecting a patient to walk in, and even went to check the hallway when no one came through, since we are the only doctor's office on the 3rd floor, and the hallway is long. There's nowhere for someone to hide. This happened a few times that morning, before the first patient of the day arrived. Later, as I was telling my coworkers about the odd rattling, an appointment card lifted from the card holder, flipped into the air, and landed in front of us on the desk. None of us had an explanation for it, and it has never happened again. After that, I began hearing voices in the stairwell. It always sounded like someone mumbling downstairs, but there would never be anyone there. Other times I'd hear footsteps, yet no one would be taking the stairs but me. My coworkers heard it as well, so we knew we weren't imagining things. One coworker once had the lobby television turn on at random, flip channels, then turn back off. The remote was in a cubby, and it's an older TV, so there's no way someone could have turned it on with an app. No one else was in the office, since it was lunchtime. There have been times when the office chairs rolled at their stations, and we all witnessed it happening. A couple of times the coffee table in the lobby was moved, and we actually heard the sound of it dragging across the floor. This evening was the scariest of all, though. I was the last in my office to leave, and storms had been raging all afternoon, so I opted to take the stairs at the opposite end of the hallway. About three quarters of a hallway down rapid footsteps behind me. I knew there was no one else in that hallway, but I looked behind me anyway, and the steps came to a sudden stop. It made me nervous, and I picked up the pace. I was halfway down the stairs, just past the second floor, when the door on the third landing banged open and shut hard. I'll admit that I screamed. I waited a few seconds, mostly out of fear, then ran down the steps. The third floor door crashed open again as I reached the first landing, and I thought I heard footsteps, but they could have been mine, echoing at that point. I ran out of the building. Tomorrow I have to go in early, and I'll be alone for at least 30 minutes. Worse, there will be storms again, and I'll have to use the stairs. I'm scared. So, I work as a cleaner in a high school in my town. The school was built somewhere around the 1960s, I believe, and has had a few upgrades. However, most buildings are original and unchanged. The area I am set to clean is a long, corridor-type building. At one end is the hall auditorium, then the drama room, followed by 3 classrooms. My area is one of the old original buildings. At night it does get pretty creepy, seeing as it's just a long corridor, and looking down dark, empty hallways is scary, but that's beside the point. Yesterday, at around 7 p.m., I was in a bit of a rush to get everything done, and needed to vacuum my 3 classrooms down the corridor. I dragged my vacuum from my storeroom, located in the building next door, and began taking it to the furthest of the 3 classrooms so I could work my way back and lock up as I went. Being in a rush, I wasn't on edge or thinking of creepy things. I just wanted to get my work done. As I reached the doorway to the second classroom, an incredibly loud bang sounded from inside the room. It was the sound of someone slamming 2 hands against a window. It made me stop in my tracks and stand completely still, just listening for anything else. Nothing else happened, so I brushed it off and walked inside. I noticed that the source of the noise was one of the old windows, which had come unlatched and opened itself. Again, I brushed it off and didn't think much of it. I continued walking down the hallway, and as I reached the 3rd classroom and began setting up my vacuum, I heard another loud bang from behind me at the entrance to the corridor. This made me a little more concerned, as it couldn't have been the window unlatching this time. Now on edge, I walked to the entrance of the corridor where I'd heard the noise, and I kid you not, another very loud bang came from the end of the hallway behind me. This cycle repeated about 2 more times, me walking from one end to the other, trying to find the source of the noise, only to hear the banging coming from the opposite end. Mind you, the hallway is around 70 to 80 meters in length, so walking back and forth was a pain. Now, I believe in ghosts 100% and have experienced noises and happenings in this building before, but nothing quite like this. I decided to speak up and say, "Hello?" I also wondered if there were kids outside knocking on the windows, being silly. I was standing in the middle classroom when right next to me, one of the class windows banged loudly. I can't describe how intense it was. I've never genuinely yelped in fear and run out of a building before. Whatever it was, I feel it was playing with me. The more scared I got, the more frequent and loud the noises became, until I was on the brink of tears. There was no one outside, to my knowledge, as I was checking the windows as it was happening. I have work again tonight, and I am honestly dreading it. So, I'm pretty sure I have a few ghosts or echoes, I don't know the difference, at my current job. I've been there for almost 2 years now, and have been seeing quite a few things pretty consistently. It first started with a single ghost who would just stand reasonably close to me, watching me work, but always in a place no person could physically be. He looked like an older man, probably in his 60s, dressed in trousers, a button-up shirt, and a sweater vest, average build and height. But his face always seemed blurred whenever I tried to look at him directly, and he would often vanish as soon as I did. I could watch him through my peripheral vision, but never straight on. The second ghost is quite similar to the first in how he acts, just standing and watching, but he likes to do it from behind curtains and windows. He's a shorter, rounder man, dressed in work clothes, always standing with his hands behind his back. Neither of these two bother me much, as they just watch me work. It's startling since I'm never expecting it, but I don't get bad vibes from them. The third ghost is much more active and interactive. The first time I encountered him, he came full tilt, sprinting at me from my right, while I was sitting and working at my bench. I first caught the movement out of the corner of my eye, and by the time I turned to face him, he was in my face, and then suddenly gone. For context, my welding bench is in the back right corner of the room, facing the door. There's an added-on storage room that you have to pass by, just 3 to 5 feet from me, to get into, so I definitely know if someone were there. Very often, when I see this one, I get bad vibes. He turns off my equipment while I'm using it, knocks stuff off the table behind me, and makes low grumbling noises right in my ear, loud enough to hear over all the machines. Often, when this ghost is around, I can see little shadow-like creatures scurrying across the floors and walls. These little things don't seem to actively do anything, but they always appear with the more active ghost. There may be more at my work, but it's not always easy to tell. I know there are certain areas that give me major heebie-jeebies, which I pay attention to, since I've had several past experiences with presences that felt malicious.
Thanks for tuning in. Watch another video if you dare.